Hi, Lou Hamilton from Audible Elegance here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are located a couple of doors north of the original Montgomery Inn, across the street from Montgomery Cyclery. And we have a webpage, www.audibleelegance.com. We do work on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel. I like to see those numbers. It's always encouraging. And what I'd like to talk about now is the confusion between two measurable factors, one being total harmonic distortion, the other being intermodulation distortion. And I want to tip my hat to Paul Klipsch because he really understood in his designs the risk of intermodulation distortion mechanically. And it occurs when a speaker cone, which has a center magnetic piece or voice coil driven inside and out of a magnetic structure, propels a cone surface of a speaker. And the less rigid that cone surface is, or the harder it is driven through a longer distance, which can happen with small drivers, even though they're more rigid, is you get a buckling of the surface, a rippling of the cone surface on a speaker, particularly woofers. And when you have different rates of speed on a driver cone, that's known as intermodulation distortion. And your ear is very adept at picking that up. Intermodulation distortion can also occur electronically, but it's best understood with my example of what happens mechanically with the speaker cone. And conversely, the one that is horrendously misunderstood is total harmonic distortion. And this became quite a game in the late 70s and early 80s. Probably the prime architect of driving it was Yamaha, because in order to come up with these incredibly low total harmonic distortion numbers, 0.001 or 0.0001, they applied a lot of negative feedback in the circuitry to achieve that. And as a lot of designers in electronics will tell you, the use of a lot of feedback has its consequences sonically. And I worked for a company at that time that sold Yamaha, and regardless of what piece I took home in that era, it could be the CR 600, 800, 820. They're integrated, the A1. The experience I had was, while it sounded neutral, the fact was that it wasn't musical at all, and you got into this feeling that if you just turned it up loud enough, it would get clear, and it never did. It just got louder of this sort of haze, as I would call it, I guess, in music, although I never talked to a band about performing hazily, I guess, but it just was not clear at all. And the truth of the matter is the ear really cannot detect total harmonic distortion until it reaches about 10%. And I'll give you an idea of how this applies, because by the time you reach 10% total harmonic distortion off an amplifier, at that point it is sending clipped waves, square waves or sine waves with the tops lopped off, that actually heat up the tweeters and melt them and kill the tweeters. And so by the time you hear that there's a real problem with what you're hearing, it's probably already toasted your tweeters and maybe your mid-ranges as well. So that goes to show you how the spec of total harmonic distortion is severely misunderstood. It's the intermodulation that really is what you hear. And so if you're looking at specs on products and you're comparing total harmonic distortion, to be frankly honest, really once you're below 10%, most likely you're not going to hear a difference at all, at least in terms of that spec. The IM, on the other hand, is something you want to pay a bit more attention to. And so if you want to know why some speakers sound really crummy and others sound good, even though they're using the same size of driver, particularly the woofer, if you look at the rigidity of the driver or the distance that they has to move, you'll see that the driver's actually buckling. This is what led Paul Klipsch to use fairly large drivers, but with corner placement, because he was using the corner to build the bass wave. Therefore, his drivers didn't have to move that far at all to effectively produce the volume and the frequency that he wanted. But once you go to more conventional designs that are along the wall, not corner loaded, that's where intermodulation and distortion can really separate, the wheat from the chaff. So happy listening. I'm not telling you what to buy. I'm just telling you to pay attention to certain things that are important and to ignore things that aren't important at all. Thank you.